opposite table, Devin, my husband of 8 years, was deep in conversation with his colleagues, oblivious to my discovery, or pretending to be. The private dining room of this upscale restaurant hummed with conversation and the clink of expensive glassware. Everyone was dressed impeccably for this quarterly team dinner, celebrating another successful financial period. Anise, Devin's boss, caught my eye from 3 seats away. Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer as she raised her phone and snapped a photo of my face. The flash momentarily blinded me, capturing what must have been my perfect look of confusion and hurt. "She's just here for the free meal?" Anise asked loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter. The table fell silent. Every eye turned toward me. I looked to Devin, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything, that would make this moment less excruciating. Instead, he shrugged, raised his glass in a mock toast, and mouthed, "Lighten up," from across the table. The laughter that followed was deafening. Some had the decency to look uncomfortable, but most joined in with enthusiasm. The seafood appetizer arrived, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it as conversations resumed around me. Occasional glances and smirks sent my way. "Don't mind them," whispered Porto, a junior associate seated beside me. His attempt at kindness only amplified my humiliation. Team jokes can be a bit intense. I nodded mechanically, reaching for my purse under the table. The weight of 20 pairs of eyes on me made each movement feel like I was underwater. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress, the new one I'd bought specifically for tonight, wanting to make a good impression. "Excuse me," I managed to say, though I'm not sure anyone besides Porto heard me. As I headed for the door, the company's CEO entered, nodding politely as we passed. I recognized him from company photos, though we'd never been introduced. He was older than most of the team, with alert eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. I hesitated, then leaned close to his ear. "I'd review those client contracts if I were you," I whispered, "especially the authentication protocols on the Asian market deals." His smile faded as understanding dawned in his eyes. Before he could respond, I continued toward the exit, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Outside, the cool night air hit my flushed face. I gulped it in, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. "Not here. Not now." The valet approached, but I waved him off, choosing to walk instead. I needed to clear my head. 6 blocks later, I stopped at a small park bench and finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had just happened. It wasn't just the humiliating place card or Anise's cruelty. It was Devin's betrayal, his willingness to sacrifice my dignity for his professional standing. My phone buzzed with texts from him. "Where are you? You're overreacting. Come back. Everyone's asking about you." I turned off my phone and watched the city lights shimmer on the river. For 3 years, I'd played the role they expected, the supportive, quiet wife who nodded along during shop talk. None of them knew I'd spent 5 years specializing in international contract authentication before stepping back to care for my ailing father. None of them knew I'd recently been approached by their parent company to anonymously audit their global client portfolio after irregularities were flagged. And none of them, especially not Devin, had any idea what I was about to do. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and silent strength, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that explore the hidden depths of those we too easily underestimate. Comment below if you've ever been in a situation where someone completely misjudged what you're capable of. I read every comment. My name is Thea Vance, and until tonight, I'd been living a life of careful compromise. I was 34 years old when I discovered my husband and his colleagues thought I was nothing more than decorative background. I'd met Devin at a charity auction 10 years earlier, him fresh from his MBA, me already establishing myself in the specialized field of international contract verification. We bonded over terrible auction wine and shared ambitions. He was charming, driven, and looked at me like I was the most fascinating person in the room. The early years were good. We bought a small house in a neighborhood we could barely afford, spent weekends renovating it together, and talked endlessly about our future. I worked for a boutique firm that specialized in authenticating international business agreements, ensuring signatures were legitimate and protocols followed. My work wasn't glamorous, but it required precision, attention to detail, and an understanding of cross-border regulations that few people possessed. Everything changed when my father's health deteriorated rapidly. He had no one else, my mother had died years before, and I was an only child. The decision to step back from my career wasn't easy, but it felt like the only choice. Devin supported me, at least at first. "Take all the time you need," he'd said. "I'm making enough for both of us." I became my father's primary caregiver for 18 months. During that time, Devin's career accelerated. He joined a prestigious firm with global reach and quickly became the rising star of their international contracts division. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I was too exhausted from hospital visits and medication schedules to dwell on it. After my father passed, I found myself adrift. The boutique firm where I'd worked had downsized. My skills felt rusty, and Devin's new lifestyle, late nights, business trips, weekend strategy sessions, left little room for me to process my grief or plan my next steps. "Why rush back to work?" Devin would ask. "We're doing fine financially. Take some time to figure out what you really want." His words seemed supportive, but his tone suggested he'd grown comfortable with our arrangement. Him, the ambitious professional, me, the supportive wife who handled our home life and showed up at company functions to smile at his colleagues. I tried to engage with his work, offering insights when he discussed challenging cases. At first, he seemed to appreciate my perspective. Then, gradually, he began dismissing my input. "The industry has changed, Thea. It's more complex now." Then came the day I spotted a familiar approach in one of his presentations left open on our shared home computer. It was a verification matrix I'd developed years earlier, repackaged with his name on it. When confronted, he'd been defensive. "It's just a basic framework, not your intellectual property. Besides, I improved it." I'd let it go, determined to find my own path forward. I began quietly refreshing my skills, taking online courses, and reconnecting with former colleagues. 2 months ago, I received an email that changed everything. Kelton Hayes, the compliance director at the parent company of Devin's firm, had been given my name by a former colleague. "We're conducting a confidential audit of subsidiary operations," he wrote. "Your expertise in contract verification would be invaluable, particularly given your distance from current internal politics." The contract they offered was generous, the work exactly in my wheelhouse, and the confidentiality clause meant I couldn't disclose my involvement to anyone, including Devin. I accepted immediately. For weeks, I reviewed digital trails, signature timestamps, and authentication protocols. What I found was disturbing. Systematic failures in contract authentication, potentially fraudulent client signatures, and millions in misreported profit margins. At the center of it all were 2 names, Devin Vance and Anise Wyatt. I'd planned to complete my audit before deciding how to proceed. Then came tonight's dinner and that place card that made their view of me crystal clear. I arrived home well after midnight, having walked for hours. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light. I found Devin sitting at the island counter, his tie loosened, expression stormy. "What exactly did you say to him?" he demanded, following me as I moved toward the refrigerator. "To whom?" I kept my voice neutral while retrieving a bottle of water. "Don't play dumb. It doesn't suit you." He blocked my path. The CEO pulled me and Anise into a meeting right after dinner. Something about contract verification procedures. Sounds important. I moved past him toward the stairs. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight." "This is about a stupid place card?" It was just office humor. I turned slowly. "Was it also office humor when you presented my ideas for the Singapore client restructuring as your own? Or when Anise implemented the exact verification shortcuts I warned you would create security vulnerabilities?" His face paled. "You don't understand how things work." "I understand perfectly. That's what terrifies you." I closed the guest room door behind me, heart hammering. Through the wall, I heard him pacing, making phone calls despite the late hour. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and reviewed the evidence I'd compiled. Tomorrow, I would contact Kelton with my preliminary findings. Morning came with the sound of Devin leaving early, the front door closing with unusual force. I made coffee and checked my secure email account. A message from Kelton confirmed our Thursday meeting with the board had been moved up due to concerning preliminary findings. By noon, Devin texted that everything was fine. The CEO was satisfied with their explanations, and the review was merely procedural. I knew better. The authentication logs couldn't be explained away so easily. When he returned that evening, he brought flowers and concert tickets to my favorite symphony. Anise says she's sorry about the joke. She didn't realize you'd be so sensitive about it. Let's move past this. For a moment, I wavered. His smile was the one that had once made my heart skip. Confident, warm, slightly crooked. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps this was salvageable. Then my phone chimed with Kelton's email. Preliminary findings require immediate attention. Meeting moved up to Thursday. I deleted the message and smiled at Devin. The concert sounds lovely. The next 2 days unfolded like a bizarre play where only I knew the ending. On Tuesday, Devin announced triumphantly that Anise was recommending him for promotion. On Wednesday, the CEO issued a company-wide email expressing full confidence in the international contracts team. Devin relaxed visibly, becoming affectionate again, suggesting we plan a vacation. Maybe Bali? We could use some time away together. I nearly told him everything that night. The words sat on my tongue as he slept beside me. But then I remembered Anise's camera flash capturing my humiliation, and I remained silent. Thursday morning, I dressed with unusual care, sometimes self-areas, a tailored navy suit I hadn't worn in years, subtle jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek knot. Client meeting? Devin asked, noticing my formal attire at breakfast. Something like that, I replied, watching him over the rim of my coffee cup. You should have mentioned it. I could have helped you prepare. It's been a while since you've been in a professional setting. I think I'll manage, I said, gathering my briefcase, another item long unused. He kissed my cheek before leaving. Good luck, whatever it is. Call me after? I definitely will, I promised. I arrived at the parent company headquarters 20 minutes before the scheduled board meeting. The towering glass building reflected the morning sun, momentarily blinding me as I approached the entrance. The security guard checked my ID against his list and directed me to the executive floor. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when I gave my name. Ms. Vance? You're our 9 o'clock? That's right, I said, maintaining a neutral expression. The board is already gathering. I'll show you to the conference room. We walked down a corridor lined with portraits of company founders and past achievements. Through glass walls, I could see clusters of employees in animated discussion, completely unaware of how their workday was about to be disrupted. The conference room door opened to reveal Kelton Hayes rising from his seat to greet me. Behind him sat the CEO I'd whispered to at the dinner, along with 7 other board members I recognized from my research. Ms. Vance, thank you for coming in person, Kelton said, shaking my hand firmly. Your preliminary report was concerning, to say the least. The CEO studied me with newfound respect and what might have been a trace of embarrassment. Ms. Vance and I had a brief encounter at a team dinner recently, he explained to the others, though I wasn't aware of her role at the time. Please, have a seat. The board chair, Evelina Merritt, gestured to an empty chair. We've reviewed your initial findings and have some questions before the division representatives arrive. For 15 minutes, I walked them through the most glaring issues I'd discovered. Authentication protocols ignored, digital signatures created sequentially, despite supposedly coming from different clients across 5 countries, profit margins, misreported by significant percentages. And you're certain these discrepancies aren't simply administrative oversights? Asked a skeptical board member. The pattern is too consistent, I replied, pulling up a timeline on the projection screen. Here you can see that immediately after each legitimate client meeting, a series of document alterations occurred from the same IP address, followed by financial adjustments that always benefited the same cost centers. The door opened, and my stomach tightened as Devin entered, followed closely by Anise. Their confident expressions froze when they saw me sitting at the board table. What is this? Anise demanded, her eyes darting between me and the board members. Why is she here? Devin stared at me, confusion morphing into dawning horror. Thea. Mr. Vance, Ms. Wett, please take a seat, Evelina said crisply. Ms. Vance is the independent auditor who has been reviewing your division's international contracts. That's impossible, Anise laughed, though the sound held no humor. She's a housewife. She has no qualifications. Actually, Kelton interrupted, Ms. Vance has extensive experience in international contract verification. Her credentials were thoroughly vetted before her engagement. I opened my presentation as Devin and Anise reluctantly took seats across from me. My audit revealed systematic authentication failures in 73% of reviewed contracts. I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Client signatures were digitally generated using stolen credentials rather than properly executed through secure channels. I displayed a series of contract pages on the screen. The authentication timestamps show these signatures were created sequentially from the same device, despite supposedly being signed by clients in 5 different countries within minutes of each other. Anise's face had drained of color. This is absurd. These are technical glitches in the recording system. The board chair silenced her with a raised hand. Please continue, Ms. Vance. The audit also identified discrepancies between profit margins disclosed to clients versus reported internally, totaling approximately $32 million over the past 18 months. I clicked to the next slide showing the financial analysis. These funds were diverted through a complex series of internal transfers that ultimately benefited 2 primary accounts. Devin leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. Thea, what are you doing? I met his gaze directly. My job. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. I presented evidence. Anise and Devin offered increasingly desperate explanations, and the board asked pointed questions that revealed they already believed my findings. Security was eventually called to escort Devin and Anise from the building, their access badges and company devices confiscated. As they were led away, Devin turned to me one last time. You've destroyed everything. No, I corrected him quietly. You had me labeled as clueless, but you never bothered to ask what I actually knew. The board asked me to stay as they discussed next steps. Legal counsel was brought in, along with the head of HR. I answered their questions mechanically, the adrenaline of confrontation giving way to a hollow feeling I couldn't quite name. By late afternoon, I was finally able to leave the building. I stepped onto the sidewalk, unsure where to go. Home no longer felt like an option. My phone, which I'd silenced during the meeting, showed 17 missed calls from Devin and dozens of increasingly frantic text messages. The final one sent a chill through me. I'm at the house. We need to talk now. I switched off my phone and hailed a taxi. The Ardmore Hotel, please. The hotel room was anonymous and bland, but it was safe. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the generic landscape painting on the wall, trying to process everything that had happened. My carefully constructed plan had worked perfectly, yet I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. A knock at the door startled me. I approached cautiously, looking through the peephole. It was Porto, the junior associate who had tried to comfort me at the dinner. Thea, I know you're in there. The front desk confirmed it. Please, I just want to talk. I opened the door partway, keeping the security chain engaged. How did you find me? I guessed. This is where the firm puts up visiting clients. He looked tired, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Can I come in? It's not safe to talk in the hallway. After a moment's hesitation, I let him in. He paced the small room before turning to face me. The office is in chaos. Security locked down all the files. HR is interviewing everyone who worked closely with Devin and Anise, and rumors are flying everywhere. He ran a hand through his hair. But that's not why I'm here. Devin is looking for you, and he's not in a good place. My heart sank. What do you mean? He came back to the office after the meeting, somehow got past security. He was gathering papers from his desk when I found him. He said some things about making you regret what you'd done. Porto looked at me with genuine concern. I don't think you should go home, at least not alone. I wasn't planning to, I said quietly. Good. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. I think I was meant to be the fall guy. What? Porto sat down heavily in the desk chair. Last month, Anise gave me access to the contract management system, something I'd been requesting for ages. Now I realized she added my credentials right when some of the worst alterations were being made. If things went south, my digital fingerprints would be all over those files. I studied him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because you just saved my career, maybe even kept me from facing criminal charges. And because, he looked away, I knew something was wrong but was too afraid to speak up. This revelation shifted my understanding of the situation. I hadn't just exposed Devin and Anise. I'd potentially saved others who might have been implicated in their scheme. There's a junior associate who tried to report irregularities, I said, remembering a name I'd come across in my investigation. Britta something? Britta Keel. They isolated her completely after she raised concerns, moved her desk to the empty floor being renovated, revoked her system access, assigned her to audit old archived accounts no one cares about. Was she aware of the full extent of what was happening? Porto shook his head. I don't think so. She just noticed some authentication protocols being skipped. But after what they did to her, everyone got the message. Don't ask questions. I made a mental note to include Britta's situation in my final report. Thank you for telling me this, Porto. He stood to leave. What will you do now? It was a question I'd been avoiding. My marriage was over. That much was certain. My contract with the parent company would conclude once my final report was submitted. And then what? I don't know, I admitted. Start over, I guess. After Porto left, I ordered room service and tried to distract myself with mindless television. But my mind kept returning to Devin, wondering what he was doing, what he was planning. Around midnight, my room phone rang, startling me from a fitful half-sleep. Ms. Vance, this is hotel security. There's a man in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He claims to be your husband. My mouth went dry. Don't send him up. I'll come down. Ma'am, we can simply have him removed. No, it's all right. I'll handle it. I threw on clothes and took the elevator down, heart pounding. The lobby was nearly empty at this hour, making Devin's presence all the more conspicuous. He was standing at the front desk, arguing with the night manager, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. When he saw me, he abandoned the conversation mid-sentence and strode toward me. Thea, what the hell is going on? I've been worried sick. The security guard moved closer, watching us carefully. I held up a hand to indicate I was okay. Let's sit, I said, gesturing to a seating area far from the front desk. I went home and you weren't there. Your clothes were gone, I thought. He ran his hands through his hair. I don't know what I thought. That something had happened to you. Something did happen to me, Devin. Years ago, when I started becoming invisible to you. His expression hardened. So, this is revenge? For not paying enough attention to you? You destroyed my career because you felt neglected? This isn't about attention. It's about respect. You stole my ideas, dismissed my concerns, and sat by while your colleagues humiliated me. It was a joke, Thea. A stupid, tasteless joke that Anise took too far. And for that, you've ruined everything we've built. We? I laughed bitterly. What exactly have we built, Devin? A marriage where you see me as window dressing? A life where I'm expected to smile and nod while being treated like I'm incapable of understanding your important work. Work that, ironically, used to be my specialty? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You don't understand what you've done. Anise has connections. Powerful people who won't be happy about this. She's already talking about lawsuits, countering your report with experts who'll discredit you. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence can be interpreted different ways. Your reputation will be destroyed. You'll never work in this field again. A chill ran through me. Was he threatening me or warning me? His face gave nothing away. I need to go back upstairs, I said, standing up. He grabbed my wrist. Thea, please. We can fix this. I can talk to the board, explain that you misunderstood what you were seeing. Say you've been under stress since your father died. I pulled my arm free. Goodbye, Devin. This isn't over, he called after me as I walked toward the elevator. You have no idea what's coming. Back in my room, I double-checked the lock and pushed a chair against the door. Sleep was impossible now. I opened my laptop and began working on my final report, determined to make it unassailable. Morning came with an email from Kelton. Emergency meeting called. Board wants to discuss settlement options presented by Wet's attorney. Your presence requested at 11 a.m. My stomach dropped. Were they already backing down? I showered and dressed quickly, stopping at a cafe across from headquarters for coffee and to gather my thoughts. As I stirred my latte, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find Britta Keel standing there, clutching her own coffee cup. "Ms. Vance? I'm Britta. Porto told me I might find you here." She was younger than I expected, probably mid-20s, with a nervous energy that made her seem perpetually on the verge of flight. "Please, join me," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. She sat, glancing around as if worried about being seen. "I wanted to thank you. I didn't know what was happening exactly, but I knew something was wrong with those contracts. When I tried to say something, she trailed off. They isolated you." I finished for her. She nodded. It was like I became toxic overnight. People I'd worked with for 2 years suddenly couldn't make eye contact. Anise told everyone I'd made a serious error that cost the company money, but wouldn't specify what it was. "I'm including your experience in my report. The board should know how they silenced internal concerns." Britta looked down at her coffee. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. I received a call this morning from someone claiming to be Anise's attorney. He said if I testified that I'd seen you tampering with contract records, they'd restore my position and give me a settlement payment." My blood ran cold. "They're trying to frame me?" "It seems that way. I told them no, of course, but I thought you should know what they're planning." The 11 a.m. meeting suddenly took on a more ominous cast. "Thank you for telling me, and for refusing to go along with it. I have copies," she said quietly, "of some of the original contracts before they were altered. I kept them because I was worried about exactly this kind of situation." Hope surged through me. "You have the unaltered originals?" She nodded. "Not all of them, but enough to show a pattern. I can forward them to you." As Britta sent the files to my secure email, I realized how close I'd come to walking into a trap. Devon's warning suddenly made more sense. Not a threat, but a glimpse of Anise's counterattack. By the time I walked into the board meeting, I was armed with Britta's documents and a renewed determination. The room fell silent as I entered. Seated at the far end of the table were Anise, Devon, and a sharp-looking attorney I didn't recognize. "Ms. Vance," Evelina began, her tone carefully neutral. "Thank you for joining us. Some concerns have been raised about the methodology of your audit. Ms. Wett's counsel has presented an alternative explanation for the discrepancies you identified." The attorney stood, distributing folders to each board member. What Ms. Vance identified as fraud was actually an approved testing protocol for a new contract management system. All clients were aware of the temporary workaround. I waited until he finished his presentation, which painted Anise and Devon as innovative problem solvers who had found a creative solution to authentication challenges during a system transition. When he finally sat down, I opened my laptop. "That's a fascinating reinterpretation of events. Before I respond, I'd like to share some additional documents that came into my possession this morning." I connected to the projector and displayed the first of Britta's original contracts. This is the original version of the Tarian Tech Agreement from March 15th. Note the profit-sharing terms on page 3. I switched to the altered version from my audit, and this is the version currently in the system, with significantly different terms that cost the client nearly $2 million. The attorney started to object, but I continued, displaying email exchanges that Britta had preserved. These communications show Ms. Wett explicitly instructing team members to use what she called creative authentication to backdate approvals and modify terms. For the next hour, I methodically dismantled their defense with Britta's evidence. The board members' expressions shifted from uncertainty to resolve as the truth became undeniable. "Given these new documents," Evelina finally said, "I believe we've heard enough. Mr. Hayes, please contact law enforcement. This has moved beyond an internal matter." As security was once again called to escort Devon and Anise from the building, I caught Devon's eye. The hatred I saw there made me flinch, but I held his gaze until he was led away. "Ms. Vance," Kelton approached as the room cleared, "your work has been invaluable. We'd like to discuss a more permanent role for you, heading up a new compliance division." The offer was tempting, but I knew I couldn't accept it. "I appreciate the offer, but I need some time to consider my next steps." As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You'll regret the day you crossed me. A. I should have been frightened, but instead, I felt a strange calm. For the first time in years, I was standing on solid ground, seeing clearly. Whatever came next, I would face it as myself, not as someone's clueless spouse, but as Thea Vance, in full possession of my power. 3 months passed in a blur of legal depositions, divorce proceedings, and rebuilding my life piece by piece. I'd moved into a small apartment downtown, closer to the financial district, where I'd started consulting for firms looking to strengthen their contract verification protocols. Word had spread about my role in exposing the fraud, bringing clients who valued integrity over flashy presentations. The criminal investigation into Devin and Anise proceeded methodically. Both had been charged with fraud, though they remained free on bail, pending trial. The threatening text messages had continued for weeks before suddenly stopping, which worried me more than their presence. They've retained Marlo Jennings, my attorney Paz, informed me during one of our regular update calls. Marlo was a defense attorney known for aggressive tactics and theatrical courtroom performances. They're building a defense that used doctored evidence to frame them out of jealousy over Devin's relationship with Anise. Their relationship? I repeated, feeling as though I'd missed something obvious. Paz was silent for a moment. You didn't know? Know what, exactly? Thea. The prosecution has evidence suggesting Devin and Anise have been involved romantically for at least 2 years. The revelation shouldn't have hurt, Wengri. Our marriage had been effectively over long before I discovered the fraud, but it did. Not because I still loved Devin, but because it confirmed how completely I'd been deceived. Will that affect the case against them? I asked, pushing personal feelings aside. Actually, it strengthens the prosecution's case, shows motive for their collusion. Paz paused. But it might complicate your divorce. Devin's trying to claim you manufactured the fraud allegations to punish him for the affair. I laughed bitterly. Of course he is. That evening, I found myself staring at the business card Kelton had given me when I declined the compliance director position. If you change your mind, he'd said, or if you need anything at all, I needed something now, access to records that might confirm when Devin and Anise's relationship began. Not for the divorce. I didn't care about extracting more in the settlement. But if their affair coincided with when my ideas began appearing in Devin's presentations, it would establish a clear timeline of betrayal that could be relevant to the criminal case. Kelton answered my call immediately. I've been wondering when I'd hear from you. I need a favor, I said, explaining what I was looking for. Come to the office tomorrow. I'll have everything we have ready for you. The next morning, I arrived at the headquarters, drawing curious glances from employees who recognized me from news coverage of the scandal. Kelton met me personally, escorting me to a small conference room where several boxes of files awaited. These are copies of all communications between Devin and Anise that our IT team recovered, he explained, including messages they thought they'd deleted. Take all the time you need. Hours passed as I sifted through emails, text message logs, and meeting notes. The affair was evident, thinly veiled in early communications, then increasingly explicit as time went on. But something else emerged that I hadn't expected. A systematic campaign to sideline me professionally. We need to make sure T stays focused on home, Anise had written in one email. Her connections in the industry could complicate things if she decides to return to work. Devin's response had been immediate. Not a concern. She's lost touch with her old contacts. I've made sure of it. The most damning exchange came from 3 years earlier, right after my father had died. Anise, still think we should find a position for her here? Could be useful having someone with her background. Devin, absolutely not. Keep her separate from all this. Better she doesn't know the details of what we're doing. Trust me. My hands shook as I read the explicit strategy they'd developed to keep me isolated from professional opportunities, to diminish my confidence, to ensure I remained the clueless spouse they could safely ignore. I copied the most relevant documents and thanked Kelton for his help. On my way out, I ran into Britta, who had been hired to help reconstruct the legitimate contracts. Thea, I was hoping to see you. She looked transformed, confident, energetic. I wanted to tell you myself. I've been promoted to lead a new authentication team. We're rebuilding everything from the ground up. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Actually, We could use someone with your expertise. The position reports directly to the board, completely independent from any division head. I promised to consider it, though I was already leaning toward declining. I needed complete independence for what I was planning next. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Evelina Merritt, the board chair. Ms. Vance, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I assured her, curious about the purpose of her call. I'll get straight to the point. Our shareholders are concerned about the upcoming trial. The publicity could be damaging. Marlo Jennings has approached us about a potential settlement. My stomach tightened. What kind of settlement? The company would cover the financial losses. Devin and Anise would resign officially and admit to procedural errors but not fraud, and all criminal charges would be dropped. And what do they want from me? I asked, already knowing the answer. A statement that your audit findings may have been affected by personal bias, and an agreement not to discuss the case publicly. They want me to recant, I said flatly. Not recant, exactly. Just acknowledge the possibility of misinterpretation. Common, I thought of the documents I'd discovered, the deliberate campaign to diminish and isolate me. And if I refuse? The company would proceed with supporting the prosecution. But Marlo has made it clear the defense will be aggressive. Your personal and professional life would be scrutinized in ways that might be uncomfortable. I need time to think about it, I said, though I already knew my answer. That evening, I spread the evidence across my dining table, the original audit findings, Britta's recovered documents, and the communications between Devin and Anise. Everything pointed to years of calculated fraud and personal betrayal. And yet, the company was willing to let it all disappear to avoid negative publicity. My phone rang again. It was Porto. Have you heard from Evelina? He asked without preamble. Yes, the settlement offer. Don't take it, he said urgently. Something bigger is happening. Anise has been meeting with executives from rival firms. I think she's offering to bring clients with her if charges are dropped. This was new information. How do you know this? I've been helping Britta reconstruct the client communications. Some recent messages don't add up. Clients making references to conversations that aren't in our records. I think Anise is laying groundwork to take major accounts with her. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, contemplating my options. The settlement would provide a clean break, allowing me to move forward without the ordeal of a trial, but it would also mean Devin and Anise faced no real consequences for their actions. More importantly, it would mean the company never addressed the systemic issues that allowed the fraud to occur in the first place. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Evelina and declined the settlement offer. Then I contacted Paz with new instructions. I want to countersue, I told her. Not just Devin for the divorce, but Anise and the company for professional defamation and creating a hostile work environment for female professionals. That's a significant escalation, Paz warned. Are you sure? Absolutely. And I want to go public with everything. The fraud, the affair, the systematic undermining of women in the organization. The company will fight back hard. Let them. The next 6 months were the most challenging of my life. As Paz had predicted, the company unleashed its full legal might against me. Marlo Jennings followed through on his promise to make the process as painful as possible, deposing former colleagues about my work habits, subpoenaing my medical records, looking for mental health issues, even questioning neighbors about visitors to my marital home. Devin attempted reconciliation when he realized I wouldn't back down, showing up at my apartment with promises of change and tearful apologies. When that failed, he switched to threats, warning that I would never work in the industry again once he and Anise were exonerated. The pressure to settle intensified as the trial date approached. Anonymous calls suggested accidents happen to people who don't know when to stop. My apartment was broken into, though nothing was taken. The message was clear: back down or face consequences. I didn't back down. 1 week before the trial was set to begin, Porto contacted me again. They're panicking, he reported. Anise tried to access the secure server last night using Britta's old credentials. Did she succeed? No, but it triggered a security alert. The board has called an emergency meeting. That alert proved to be the turning point. The company's internal investigation revealed that Anise had been systematically copying client data, presumably to take to competitors. Faced with this new evidence of ongoing malfeasance, the board finally cut ties completely. 2 days later, Devin called me, his voice ragged. They've withdrawn support for our defense. Anise has fled the country. Thea, please. You have to help me. I was just following her lead. Like you followed my lead when you presented my ideas as your own? I asked calmly. That was different. I gave you credit at home, didn't I? I always told you how brilliant you were, just not brilliant enough to be acknowledged publicly. He was silent for a moment. What do you want? Name your price to make this go away. I don't want anything from you, Devin. Not anymore. The criminal trial proceeded without Anise, who had indeed fled to a country without an extradition treaty. Devin, left to face charges alone, accepted a plea deal that included significant financial penalties and a 5-year ban from working in financial services. My divorce was finalized 3 months later. I declined alimony, wanting nothing that would keep me connected to Devin. The professional defamation suit against the company settled out of court for an amount that ensured I would never have to worry about finances again. But money had never been my goal. The following year, I received an invitation to speak at an industry conference on contract verification ethics. As I prepared my presentation, I received an unexpected email from Britta. Thought you'd want to know. Anise has surfaced. She's working for a small firm in Singapore under a different name. Apparently, her new colleagues find her difficult and controlling. Some things never change. I smiled at the update but set it aside. Anise was no longer my concern. The day of the conference arrived, and I took the stage feeling calm and centered. The large auditorium was filled with industry professionals, many of whom I recognized from my earlier career. As I arranged my notes at the podium, I noticed a familiar face in the back row, Anise's former assistant, now working entry-level at a small regional company. She didn't meet my eyes as I began my presentation. Let's talk about the true cost of underestimating the person across the table from you. For the next hour, I detailed the case study of the fraud without naming the company or individuals involved. I explained the verification protocols that had been circumvented, the warning signs that had been ignored, and the corporate culture that had enabled the fraud to flourish. The greatest asset in contract verification isn't software or systems, I concluded. It's people who feel empowered to speak up when something doesn't look right. The applause was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came after, when a group of young professionals, mostly women, approached me with questions and requests for mentorship. As the crowd thinned, I noticed Anise's former assistant hovering nearby. When we were finally alone, she approached hesitantly. I wanted to apologize, she said quietly. I knew what they were doing to you. The place card at the dinner. That was my handwriting. Anise made me do it. I studied her face, seeing the genuine remorse there. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm trying to rebuild my career after everything fell apart, and I keep running into your name. Everyone respects you now. I just wanted you to know I regret my part in it all. I considered her for a moment. What's your name? Mira. Well, Mira, here's what I've learned. We all make choices based on the information and courage we have at the time. The question is what we do afterward. She nodded uncertainly. So, you don't hate me? No, but I do have a proposition for you. 2 years after the conference, I stood in the lobby of my new firm, Vantage Point Verification, watching as clients moved through the reception area. We had grown rapidly, building a reputation for thoroughness and integrity in contract authentication. Britta had joined me as a partner, bringing her technical expertise and unwavering ethical standards. Porto had come aboard 6 months later, heading our client relations department. And Mira, after proving herself in increasingly responsible positions, now led our training division, teaching new hires to recognize the warning signs of fraud. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former financial executive Devin Vance petitions for early end to industry ban. Request denied. I closed the notification without emotion. Devin's career trajectory was no longer my concern, just as Anise's new identity in Singapore meant nothing to me now. My revenge hadn't been the public humiliation I'd once envisioned in the dark hours after that dinner. It hadn't been the criminal charges or financial penalties, though those were justified. It hadn't even been the divorce that freed me from a marriage built on deception. My revenge was this: I had reclaimed my expertise, my confidence, and my voice. I had built something valuable from the ashes of betrayal, and I had created a space where others like Britta could thrive without being diminished or silenced. Most satisfying of all, I had transformed the very industry that had once been weaponized against me. Our firm's client list now included the parent company that had employed Devin and Anise, along with most of their competitors. Our verification protocols had become the industry standard, and our training program was mandatory for certification. Every contract in the financial sector now passed through systems I had designed or approved. Every verification specialist was trained according to ethics guidelines I had helped establish. And every fraudulent scheme, like the one Devin and Anise had perpetrated, was now exponentially harder to execute. I stepped into the conference room where our newest clients waited, representatives from the global firm where Anise had reportedly landed after her time in Singapore. They had no idea of my history with their new executive, nor did they need to know. "Good morning," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's talk about how we can help secure your verification protocols." They listened attentively as I outlined our approach, nodding with respect at each point. No one interrupted. No one questioned my expertise. No one treated me as anything less than the authority I had become. That was the revenge I had crafted, not a moment of triumph or humiliation, but a complete recalibration of power. I had transformed myself from the clueless spouse handler into the industry leader whose approval they now eagerly sought. As the meeting concluded and handshakes were exchanged, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass wall, confident, composed, completely in command. I barely recognized the woman who had once stood frozen with humiliation at a team dinner, staring at a cruel place card. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood her true worth, and that, I realized as I walked back to my office, was the most satisfying revenge of all. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more narratives about reclaiming your power. Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how you turn the tables. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others, but about rebuilding yourself stronger than before.